Lemaire, moral hypocrisy, persistent self-deception, and the inevitable confrontation with inner truth. The testimony of the spirit Lemaire, presented in the second part of Heaven and Hell, clearly exposes the spiritual effects of conscious moral hypocrisy, prolonged self-deception, and the attempt to maintain a virtuous image that does not correspond to one's own attitudes. It is a striking account of the difference between appearing correct and actually being consistent with moral laws. Lemaire manifests with intellectual clarity and preserved memory. In life, he cultivated an appearance of righteousness, supported by speeches, judgments of others, and carefully constructed public postures. However, his intimate choices were guided by personal interests, convenience, and a lack of empathy. On the spiritual plane, this dissociation between image and reality becomes impossible to sustain. Consciousness begins to see, without disguises, the truth about itself. Modern depth psychology helps to understand this state. Self-deception is a powerful defense mechanism, capable of maintaining a comfortable internal narrative for years. However, when external reinforcements disappear and awareness expands, the constructed structure collapses. Suffering arises from the clash between the idealized self-image and the lived moral reality. Spiritism clarifies that Lemaire's suffering is not punishment for specific failures, but rather the result of the persistence in living an inner lie. Spiritual life is not guided by appearances, positions, or reputations. It demands authenticity. When consciousness realizes it has deceived itself, moral pain emerges as an invitation to true reconstruction. Modern science reinforces this reading by showing that psychological integrity depends on the coherence between professed values and practiced behaviors. Cognitive dissonance, when finally recognized, generates intense discomfort, but it also creates the opportunity for change. On the spiritual level, this recognition is direct and unavoidable. Another striking point in Lemaire's testimony is the initial resistance to admitting the truth. He tries to justify himself, minimize responsibilities, and preserve the image he has built. This resistance prolongs suffering as it hinders learning. Spiritism teaches that liberation begins when consciousness abandons the defense of appearances and accepts inner honesty. The account shows that hypocrisy is a prison created by one's own conscience. Maintaining a facade requires constant effort and hinders real growth. After passing, when there is no audience or social advantages, the conscience is forced to confront what it avoided during life. This testimony brings a current and necessary warning. In a world that values image, performance, and external validation, Lemaire's account reminds us that conscience is not sustained by speeches, but by real choices. Spiritual life does not reward characters, it educates consciences. Spiritism teaches that this state is not definitive. As Lemaire accepts his inner reality, acknowledges flaws, and develops a sincere desire for change, a process of moral re-education begins. Suffering loses its function when the truth is accepted and transformed into learning. Lemaire teaches us that true morality begins in the silence of one's own conscience. Being honest with oneself, aligning values and attitudes, and shedding masks is now the safest way to avoid unnecessary future pains. Conscience grows when it chooses the truth, even when it requires a deep revision of one's own ego. If this testimony has helped you reflect on authenticity, moral coherence, and self-deception, like, share, and leave your comment. Your participation helps this message reach more people.